Once upon a time, in a peaceful village of Umuano, tucked between green hills and flowing rivers, there lived two families in enmity, the Ezes family and the Obi family. The serene village of Umuano had been home to these two families for generations. They had lived in the safe village as long as anyone could remember. But there was a problem: the two families did not get along. Long ago, a great argument had torn them apart. No one really remembered what started it, but it was said to have been over land ownership. And since that time, the Ezes family and the Obi family refused to let go of their grievances and always engaged in fights with little or no provocation. They lived in the same community, but their paths never crossed due to the war between them. But as the years passed, something happened that neither family could ignore. Two children were born: Ugochi Eze, a lovely baby girl, and Chijioke Obi, a handsome baby boy. From the moment they were born, they were like two stars in the same sky, shining brightly but separated by a wall of enmity that neither of them had built. Both children were growing. Chijioke, the son of the Obi family, left the village to his maternal home where he was attending school. Ugochi, the daughter of Eze family, grew into a beautiful young girl, and loved having quiet time by the serene river that ran through the village. She loved running around the tall grasses beside the river, her feet bare, and liked playing in the water. Most times she would sit on the smooth rock by the river and feel the cool water as she dipped her feet into it. She equally spent time with her grandmother too, and loved the stories her grandmother told about the gods of the village, about the great warriors who once lived there, and about how the village had come to be. But Ugochi's favorite stories were always the ones about love, about how her great-grandmother had fallen in love with a man from a different village, and how their love stood strong against all odds. A time came when Chijioke returned to Unuano village. He was a quiet, good-looking boy and loved taking a walk around the riverbank. And he had grown up in the shadows of the old feud between the Eze family and his own. Like Ugochi, he loved running and playing by the river. And he often spent time by the riverbank, but there was one thing that was always in his mind. His family had told him stories about the Eze family, always with the same warning: never trust them. They are not your people. Chijioke didn't really understand the reason for the hate. After all, he had never met anyone from Eze family before. But the words of his father and uncles echoed in his ears. They said the Eze family was full of pride and that they wanted to take everything that belonged to the Obi family. But deep inside, Chijioke had a feeling that he could never explain. Maybe things were not as they seemed. One day, when Ugochi was quietly sitting by the river, she noticed a young handsome boy walking on the other side of the riverbank. He had been walking along the river, trying to find a spot to cool off, when Ugochi sighted him. "Hello." Ugochi called out across the water, waving at him. She was alone but was not afraid as the boy looked calm and responsible. "Hi." Chijioke called back, smiling as he tried crossing the river to where Ugochi was sitting. When he finally crossed the river, Ugochi stood up and he went closer to her and they stood face to face. "What is your name?" he asked. "My name is Ugochi Eze." Chijioke became silent for a moment. He had never seen a girl from the Eze family before, and he was both curious and nervous. He had heard stories about them, but seeing Ugochi with his own eyes made him wonder if the stories were true. He continued staring without saying a word. "Is anything the matter?" Ugochi questioned. No. "What is your name?" Ugochi asked. "My name is Chijioke Obi," he responded. They both stood there speechless for a moment, just looking at each other. Ugochi felt something strange in her chest. It was as if her heart had skipped a beat. She had heard the stories too, but something about this boy felt different from what she had been told. "Do you come here often?" Chijioke asked, his voice a little shy. "Yes," Ugochi replied, her voice soft and warm. "I love the river. It tells stories, you know." Chijioke nodded, but he wasn't sure what she meant. "Stories from the river?" he asked. "Yes. The river is like an old person who has seen everything. If you listen closely, you can hear the stories of the past," she said. Chijioke felt a strange comfort in her words. It was as though she had opened a door inside him, and for the first time, he didn't feel so alone in his thoughts. "That's interesting," he said, stepping a little closer to her. "I never thought of the river like that." They talked for a while, about the river, about the village, and about the things they liked to do. There was a sense of ease between them, as though they had known each other forever. But soon, the sound of voices in the distance broke the moment. They both turned and gazed towards the direction of the voices. Chijioke saw his father and uncles coming towards the river. His heart dropped. He knew what would happen next. "I have to go," Chijioke said quickly. "My father is coming. I'm not supposed to be here." Ugochi felt a sudden pang of sadness. "Wait," she said, but Chijioke was already running away. She tried to run after him, but he ran too fast and disappeared into the bushes. As Chijioke vanished, Ugochi came back and sat on the rock by the riverbank looking sad and worried. Her mind was spinning. Who was this boy? Why did he make her feel like she had known him all her life? And why did she feel as though they had been separated by something far stronger than just the river? Days passed after that first meeting by the river. Ugochi couldn't stop thinking about Chijioke. She had tried to forget him, but his face kept coming back to her. The way he had smiled at her, the way he had listened so carefully to her words, it was unlike anyone she had ever met. But she knew she had to be careful. Her family had warned her about the Obi family. They had taught her to stay away, to never get too close to them. But how could she stay away from someone who seemed so kind? Meanwhile, Chijioke was feeling the same way. He couldn't stop thinking about Ugochi. She was different from what he had been told. She wasn't like the stories his family had passed down through the years. He had expected her to be proud and haughty, but instead, she was warm and gentle. He didn't understand why they couldn't be friends, why their families had to fight. One evening, Chijioke decided he would go back to the river, hoping to see Ugochi again. But when he arrived, he found that she was not there. He was disappointed, but he waited, thinking about the way she had looked at him. Suddenly, he heard a noise and investigated. Unexpectedly, he saw Ugochi standing over there smiling. He was surprised and excited to see her. Ugochi crossed the water to meet him. "You came back," Ugochi said softly, as she got closer to him. Chijioke, a little embarrassed. "I couldn't stop thinking about our conversation. I didn't think I'd see you again." Ugochi's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't expected him to be there, but now that he was, she couldn't help but feel happy. "I'm glad you came," she said, stepping closer to him. And just like that, as they interacted, the bond between them grew stronger. Without saying another word, they sat down by the river, their hearts deeply connected. Neither of them knew what the future held, but they both knew one thing: they had found something special in each other. As the days went by, Ugochi and Chijioke's meetings by the river became more frequent. They always met in secret, away from the watchful eyes of their families, who had no idea their children were beginning to form a bond. The river became their place of refuge, where time seemed to stand still, and the outside world with all its bitterness and hatred faded into the background. One afternoon, as they sat together by the river, Ugochi asked Chijioke a question she had been wondering about for days. "Chijioke, why do our families hate each other so much? What happened between them?" she asked, her voice quiet, as though afraid the river might carry her words away. Chijioke was silent for a long moment. He had asked himself the same question many times, but the answers were always the same, spoken in whispers, passed down from one generation to the next. "I don't really know," he said slowly, his voice tinged with confusion. "My father always says the Ezes family is greedy, that they want everything the Obi family has. And my uncles too, they say the same thing. They tell me to stay away from you and your family. But I don't know why. I've never met anyone from the Ezes family before now. I don't understand." Ugochi felt a bit of sadness in her chest. She had heard the same stories from her own family. Her father and uncles often spoke of the Obi family as though they were enemies, people to be feared, people who had wronged them in some way. She had never questioned those stories, never dared to. But now, sitting beside Chijioke, the words felt empty, like old ghosts that had long outlived their meaning. "My father tells me that the Obi family was once very powerful," Ugochi said softly. "They had land, they had wealth, and they had the respect of the village. But my father says that one day, the Obi family tried to take land that belonged to the Ezes family. They wanted it for themselves. And since then, our families have fought. Every year, the feud grows stronger. But I don't know why. I don't even know if what my father says is true. I don't think it's about land anymore. Maybe it was once. But now, it's just about the hate that's been passed down. It's like no one remembers why they're angry anymore. They just know that they are. Chijioke said. Ugochi sighed. I feel like the stories we've been told are all lies, Chijioke. Lies that we have been forced to believe. How can we stop this if we don't even know the truth? Maybe the truth is something we need to find together. If we don't ask questions, if we don't try to learn what really happened, then the hate will never end. Chijioke added. Ugochi's heart skipped a beat at his words. For the first time, she had hope that maybe, just maybe, they could change the future of their families. I want to help, Ugochi said, looking into his eyes. But how do we begin? How do we uncover the truth when no one is willing to talk about it? Chijioke, with a little spark of determination lighting up his face, we start by asking the people who were there. Maybe our grandfathers know more than they've told us. Maybe they've kept the truth hidden because of all the hurt. But if we ask, maybe they'll tell us. Ugochi nodded, her heart swelling with a mixture of excitement and fear. She didn't know if they were ready to confront the past, but she did know that they couldn't keep running from it. Not if they wanted to find peace, not if they wanted to end the hatred that had torn their families apart for so long. A few days later, Chijioke and Ugochi set out on a new mission to speak with their grandfathers. They knew that the elders were the ones who held the key to the past, the ones who could tell them what had really happened between the Ezes and Obis families. But approaching the elders was no easy task. Both of their grandfathers were respected figures in the village, known for their wisdom but also for their stubbornness. Ugochi and Chijioke decided to visit Ugochi's grandfather first. He was a tall, imposing man with a deep voice and a stern demeanor. He had always been a quiet man, keeping to himself and rarely speaking of the past. But Ugochi felt that no matter what, she had to ask him. The day came and they walked together to Ugochi's grandfather's home, where he lived in a small hut on the outskirts of the village. It was a humble home, a peaceful place where the old man spent most of his days in solitude. "Grandfather," Ugochi called out as they approached the hut. Her grandfather appeared at the door, his face wrinkled with age but still sharp. He looked at the two of them with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "Ugochi, Chijioke," he said in a deep, rumbling voice. "What brings you here?" Ugochi took a deep breath, her heart racing. "Grandfather, may we speak with you? We want to know the truth. The truth about what happened between the Ezes family and the Obi family. Why do we fight? Why do we hate each other?" Her grandfather's expression softened for a moment, but then it darkened again. He stepped outside the hut and motioned for them to sit down on the wooden bench, and he sat with them. "You children are asking questions that should have been asked long ago," he said slowly, his voice heavy with the weight of years. "But know this, the past is a dangerous thing. It can bring peace, or it can destroy everything you hold dear." Chijioke's heart pounded. He had never seen or heard the old man speak before. "Grandfather, we need to know. We want to end the hate. We want to understand," Chijioke said. Ugochi's grandfather looked at them both with eyes full of sorrow. "It started many years ago, before your fathers were born. It was over land, yes, but it was also over pride. Both families wanted to be the most powerful in the village. The Obi family was once very strong, and your father, Ugochi, was a proud man. He wanted to protect what was his." He paused, staring off into the distance as if lost in memory. "But there was a time when both families were friends," he continued. "There was a time when we all lived in peace. But greed and fear took over, and the love that once existed between us turned into something darker. The hate that you see now, it was passed down through the generations. And no one has been willing to let go of it." Ugochi felt a heavy weight settle in her chest. "But how can we change that? How can we stop the hate if no one is willing to forgive? It is not easy, my child. Forgiveness is something that must come from within. But if you truly want to end the cycle of hate, you must find a way to make your families see that the past is gone. It no longer has the power to control us unless we let it. Ugochi and Chijioke sat in silence, absorbing the heavy words. They knew what they had to do now. They had to confront their families. But they also knew that the road ahead would not be easy. The pain of the past ran deep, and it would take more than just good intentions to heal the wounds. Ugochi and Chijioke knew they had to speak with their families. It was time to confront the truth, to break the cycle of hate that had controlled their lives for so long. The next day they met again, but this time, they were no longer children looking for answers. They were two young people determined to find a way to heal the wounds of the past. We will do this together, no matter what happens, we will face it together, Chijioke said. Ugochi nodded, her heart filled with both fear and hope. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for sure: if they could find the courage to face the past, then maybe their love could change everything. Chijioke later met his grandfather, who confirmed everything Ugochi's grandfather said. Following that confirmation, Chijioke confronted his father Obi Okafor. His father called him aside and was speaking in low tones to him. They both wore frowns. "This is madness," he said, his voice low. "I never thought I'd hear this from my son. You speak of truth, but what truth can there be? The Ezes family has always been our enemy. They took what belonged to us. My father told me, his father told him, and I have passed it down to you. We have no place for their lies in our hearts. But what if the truth is something else, something we haven't been told?" Chijioke asked, his voice desperate. "What if the people who came before us made a mistake, and we've been carrying their burden ever since?" Obi Okafor stared at his son, a flicker of doubt crossing his face. It was only for a moment, but it was enough. The next day a meeting was scheduled for both families to meet at the village square. It was a quiet evening when Ugochi and Chijioke walked to the village square to meet their families as they gathered. The village was peaceful, too peaceful for what was about to unfold. Ugochi's heart beat loudly in her chest, and she could feel the weight of the past on her shoulders. She glanced at Chijioke, who was walking beside her, his face set in a mixture of determination and worry. He squeezed her hand, as if to say, "We are in this together." They had agreed to tell their families the truth, that the old grudges, the hatred, the secrets that had kept them apart for so long, were no longer going to control their lives. But as they approached the meeting spot, Ugochi felt a flutter of doubt. What if they weren't ready to hear the truth? What if this would only make things worse? But then she remembered her grandfather's words: "Forgiveness is something that must come from within." But if you truly want to end the cycle of hate, you must find a way to make your families see that the past is gone. It no longer has the power to control us unless we let it. As they arrived, both families were already waiting under a big iroko tree. The tension was thick in the air. Chijioke's family stood on one side ready for battle, with his uncle in front looking very angry. Ugochi's father, Eze Namdi, stood at the other side, his strong, proud face hard as stone. His brothers and other family members stood behind him. "Ugochi," her father said, his voice deep and commanding. "What is this about? What is this meeting for?" Ugochi took a deep breath and stepped forward. She held Chijioke's hand tightly in hers, feeling the warmth of his presence. This was it, the moment of truth. "Father, uncles," she began, her voice steady but trembling inside. "Chijioke and I have something to say. Something that we've discovered, and it's time for the truth to come to light." Eze Namdi's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about, child?" His tone was cold, but Ugochi stood her ground. "This war between our families. It has been going on for far too long. For generations, we've been told stories about how the Obi family wronged the Eze family. And the Obi family has told their own stories about how we wronged them. But Chijioke and we've learned that what we've been told isn't the full truth." Her father stepped back, his expression filled with disbelief. "What nonsense is this, Ugochi? The truth is what has been passed down through our bloodline. The Obi family cannot be trusted. They have always been enemies of the Eze family. But that's not what happened, father," Ugochi said, her voice growing firmer. "We've spoken with the elders. We've heard their side of the story. We've learned the truth." Chijioke stepped forward, his voice strong. "We were reliably informed that there was a time when the Ezes family and the Obi family were friends, good friends. They worked together and helped each other. But then something happened, a misunderstanding, a betrayal that changed everything. But no one really knows what happened. All we've heard are the stories that have been passed down with hate." Ugochi's father shook his head, clearly refusing to accept what he was hearing. "You want me to believe that we've been wrong for all these years? That everything we've fought for, everything we've lost, was based on lies?" Ugochi said. "Yes, father. The hatred we've carried for generations, it's based on fear, pride, and lies. But it doesn't have to be this way anymore. We can change the future if we stop holding on to the past." For a moment, there was silence. The whole village seemed to hold its breath. The only sound was the rustling of leaves in the trees, as if nature itself was waiting for an answer. At that point, Ugochi's grandfather, who had quietly stood in the background, now stepped forward and spoke up. His voice was calm but filled with wisdom. "Okafor," he said, turning to face Chijioke's grandfather, "you and I were there when it all began. We were children, but we remember. It was not a betrayal that divided us. It was pride and misunderstanding. The Ezes family didn't steal from your family, neither did your family steal from us. It was a mistake, a misunderstanding of ownership. But because of pride, neither side was willing to back down. The real truth is that the hatred we've been passing down is not based on justice, but on a fear of being wrong." The weight of those words hit the gathered families like a thunderclap. The air grew still, and everyone was silent. Ugochi's heart pounded in her chest, hoping that the truth would be enough to change everything. Her father, Eze Namdi, looked furious. It was clear that the anger and bitterness of the past still held him, but he was beginning to see something different. The elders in their midst who knew the truth were seen whispering to one another, in confirmation of testimony given by Uchichi's grandfather. For a long moment, no one spoke. It was as if the village itself was waiting for the answer. "It is possible," Chijioke's grandfather whispered. "We can undo what has been done. We can forget the years of hatred and start anew. Maybe it is time to let go of the past. Maybe it is time to forgive," he added. The words hung in the air, heavy but hopeful. And just like that, something changed. The walls that had separated the Ezes and Obi families for so long began to crumble. The years of hate that had shaped their lives started to loosen their grip. It wasn't going to be easy, and it wasn't going to happen overnight, but for the first time in many years, both families saw a glimmer of hope for a future where they could live together in peace. Ugochi turned and held Chijioke, her heart full. "We've done it, Chijioke. We've shown them the truth. Together, we can change the future," Chijioke said. A few days later, there was a reconciliation party. The Ezes family and the Obi family, once divided by generations of hatred, now stood together in the same place, bound by the truth they had uncovered. There was still much work to be done, but the first step had been taken. Ugochi and Chijioke knew that their love was the symbol of a new beginning, not just for them, but for their families and their village. The echoes of their father's anger were fading, and in their place, the seeds of peace and unity were being planted. The road ahead would not be easy, but with love, understanding, and courage, Ugochi and Chijioke believed they could build a future where their families would no longer be torn apart by the past. And in the days to come, the village of Umuano would remember the story of two young hearts who chose to break the chains of history and bring about a new dawn. Ugochi and Chijioke, through their love, help heal the wounds of the past and set the stage for a peaceful future. Thank you for watching. Please kindly subscribe to this channel for more interesting African folktale stories. Remain blessed.